Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
Hello, and welcome to The Good, the Pod, and the Ugly, a film podcast where we talk essential filmographies of notable directors or actors each season, along with a number of specials. I'm your co-host, Ken.
And I'm your other co-host, Thomas.
You might know us from our other podcast, Dickin' Wild Drunk, where Thomas gets nearly blackout drunk and then tries to recount plots to Philip K. Dick novels to me. It is place number 3 in the comedy podcast category, and hopefully we get some listeners from that.
Yeah, but today, for this podcast, The Good, the Pod, the Ugly, we pair 2 films per episode. You're listening to the first half of a paired episode in which we do a deep dive on the backgrounds of these films. Who we talk about this season, Ken, and what films are we watching this week?
Gosh, that's a great question, Thomas. This season, we are all about everybody's favorite scarf connoisseur, Darren Aronofsky. We are doing a temporal pincer movement of his movie, starting the last one and the first one, and then moving towards the middle, which will be our next chapter, Black Swan and the Wrestler. And this week, very fortuitous pairing, The Fountain and Noah. Oh, we should mention that we're being joined by Ryan.
Hello.
This episode.
Oh.
Ryan has
He's welcome back after The Whale.
You know, that was the most divisive movie I think we've ever covered on this podcast. I don't think either of these will be nearly as, I hope.
Yeah, we had like 3 contributors and maybe 18 opinions, all battling it out, I think. So, hey, yeah, welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And thank you for making it through potentially both of the movies.
Yes. I not only watched, but, enjoyed both of these movies. So.
Fuck. Okay, we're going to have another great episode, folks. Strap in. So, The Fountain and Noah, both films. They open with a quote from the Book of Genesis. Both have a graphic novel tie-in. Both have Mark Margolis. Both have a portion of their filming taking place outside the United States. There might be a baboon in both, but the hero definitely handles a bird in both, and both have at least one animal under sedation. In both films, you get to see outer space. There's instantly sprouting flowers. The main character may be a vegan, but the main character definitely shaves his head at some point off screen, has an hallucination, gets wet, and discusses precipitation with their wives. And both films are PG-13.
Wow.
That seems very comprehensive, Thomas. Great job.
Thanks. The way these movies line up is phenomenal. Doing Aronofsky with the temporal pincer movement, each pairing has been fantastic and very illuminating and enlightening as to his entire career, what he's obsessed with, and how much better he's gotten as a director, possibly.
But for today, for this episode, we're going to stick to The Fountain before coming back around to Noah. And The Fountain came out in the year 2006, the same year as Devil Wears Prada, Miami Vice, Wicker Man, and then that great pairing of Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima.
Oh, good year.
Let's go around. Is this your first time watching the film, Ryan?
No, this is probably my 5th or 6th time.
Watching The Fountain?
Holy shit. I had a little bit of water in my mouth to take a break, and now my computer is covered in water. I think it's okay. There was nothing else in the water, so it should be okay.
Yeah, we are talking about The Fountain, right, Ryan? The
Yes.
Aronofsky film.
Not The Fountainhead. I know you're a big Ayn Rand.
No, in my group of friends, Aronofsky was one of the favored directors, and my old roommate, who Thomas knows well, really loved Aronofsky and owned this movie and watched it quite a bit. So I saw it that way. I saw it opening weekend, with the boys. Yeah, and part of it was, at this time when this came out, couple 2-3 viewings just to really get at what it was trying to do and trying to say, regardless of kind of quality. But ironically, it was only this time that I actually really understood the plot wholly for the first time.
And that's a hell of a commitment, because this movie's about 12 hours long.
It's 96 minutes, Thomas.
I don't know. I beg to differ. I saw it in the theater, and I'm pretty sure wanted to go to sleep multiple times and woke up so much older.
Well, I got one better, that I went and saw it opening weekend, not with the boys, with myself. So, euphemistically the boys. And to finish watching it, I went back to the theater and it was still playing. So that's how I got to finish watching it.
Finish it. So I saw this film. Seen this film twice. Once in the theaters and once for this podcast. And we'll talk about whether or not I'll watch it a third time. The first time I was in theaters, was with a group of friends, and the other two people. So there was like a row of us. I think we were rolling in maybe 6 deep, and then there were like 2 couples. One couple, I don't think, watched the film at all. They were just making out. The other couple left. And so we started yelling at the screen, "Finish it," over and over again. And it was amusing to us because we needed something to keep us entertained during that, you said, hour and 36 minutes. Oh, boy. Okay, so yeah, before we still have to talk about the plot and other things before we jump into our reactions. This movie had a hell of a production. Right? Like they started to try and make it in 2001. Originally, it was a $70 million budget with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett attached. It was going to shoot a large portion of it. The ziggurat and other historical scenes were going to take place, at least in the North or in the Latin American jungle, were going to take place in Australia. So they started to build that giant set. And at some point, the Australian production company pulled out. So they scrambled and tried to find another production company, found that, and then Brad Pitt pulled out. Probably a Catholic joke in there somewhere. So the studio was going to shut it down. Our favorite scarfer, Aronofsky, started calling around, and the person he really wanted to replace Brad Pitt was Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe said no. He passed. He had just come off of whatever that movie was, where he's a sea captain, master and commander.
Whatever that movie was. One of the greatest motion pictures, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Hey, I'm gonna call him Romper Stompery, dude.
I'm going through a croissance in my house, so please respect my privacy during this time.
Huh. Okay, so you're eating crow.
I'm watching crow and eating crow.
And I guess during this time, probably Aronofsky was attached to Batman or was trying to develop Batman, because it's some of the behind the scenes things you can watch on the DVD and Blu-ray. He mentioned something like, that would have been that's even better than doing Batman. We're talking about an action sequence.
He was working on, when did Batman Begins come out? 2005. So
yeah.
After Requiem, he was working on Batman Year One, an adaptation of the Frank Miller comic. And I don't think that got killed until they gave Nolan the green light. So I'm sure it seems like he was also developing The Fountain, but I think a lot of his professional time was spent working on Year One.
However that happened, production was shut down. They boxed things up, and Aronofsky went back to the script to reduce it down and try and find another way of making the film. And when he did, I think his budget was $35 million, so half the budget. Mm-hmm. He figured he would do a lot of it with green screen and with an actor a little cheaper than Brad Pitt. That actor he would meet backstage of his musical performance that was, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. I saw him actually do this in Australia. Fuck, what's it? Oh, The Boy from Oz. Hugh Jackman was performing on stage. Aronofsky met him backstage, gave him the script, and Hugh Jackman stayed up, even though he got in home late, 11 o'clock or something, stayed up all night reading the script and loved it.
Because that's how long it took.
Well, actually, the last bit of it wasn't finished. He had to write that last bit in himself.
So is this a leather-bound copy of the fountain that he was given?
Written in fountain pen. Yes.
Curiously written in fountain pen without a single mistake, which I'm calling total bullshit on, by the way. There's no way she was that good.
I don't... Thomas, did you come across the stuff about his parents' illness in the development of the fountain? Because that seems
his parents were diagnosed with cancer during this time.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what kicked off the redevelopment of the script.
Oh, okay.
And that's when he brought in Ari Handel as a friend and spiritual guy, fellow Jew, to kind of help him rewrite and redevelop it, is my understanding. Yeah, so it's well, we'll get to the commentary later, but the Rachel Weisz stuff is forgivable in my mind, considering that, though it doesn't make it pleasant to watch or interesting.
Which Rachel Weisz stuff? The Queen? Do we need to do a synopsis for this?
Yeah, we should probably get into the synopsis. I'm sorry for skipping ahead, boys.
Okay. What is going on with your squeaky chair, Ryan? I'm gonna have to edit all those squeaks out.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, you're gonna need some WD-40 for that.
Okay.
So, are we gonna time me for this? I didn't time myself after writing it. I didn't even read it out loud before, so this is all...
fully prepared.
Okay. Yes, fully prepared as usual. Whenever you want me to start, just go ahead.
Oh, I'm prepared. Go ahead.
Okay. The Fountain synopsis. What is this? Some kind of Spanish Inquisition? Well, yes, actually. Then a queen, Rachel Weisz, sends Wolverine to a lost Mayan pyramid to find the Tree of Life and the Fountain of Youth. That's one story. What is this? Some kind of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes? Well, yes. In the present, Wolverine tries to find a cure for a tumor his wife, played by Rachel Weisz, has, and uses sap from probably the same tree in the first part of the movie to maybe find eternal youth for a dying monkey, which isn't Caesar from Planet of the Apes, but he wants to cure the tumor instead. Weisz also writes a pretentious as fuck manuscript on parchment and leather bound telling the first story about the Spanish Inquisition set adventure. What is this, Zardoz by John Borman or Slaughterhouse-Five with Billy Pilgrim floating around in a space bubble in the future, trapped inside with the Tree of Life from the other two stories? I think. Maybe in the dying, love-signifying dying star nebula Weisz was looking at earlier? I guess. That's my synopsis.
Oh, good. That was actually quite good. It was a minute, 4 seconds, but I'm going to have to dock you a whole minute because baboons aren't monkeys. They're apes.
See,
it's called Planet of the Apes, not Planet of the Monkeys. If that helps you remember.
Okay. Damn it. I need some of that sap. I might have remembered if I had some of that sap from that tree.
Yeah, the hairy tree. Love that tree.
Uh-huh. Yep. Love that tree. Who doesn't love a hairy tree?
So, I guess the hard part for me in watching this film, I mean, there's a few different hard parts. And I have some questions for you guys. But one of the questions I have is that Aronofsky originally had a $70 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
He cut it in half. And he had to rewrite the script a little bit for that. What did he actually rewrite? Like, what would having twice the budget have gotten him that we don't actually see on screen presently?
So on that DVD that my old roommate had, there was a behind the scenes featurette, and
it goes to the 4 different timelines or 3 different timelines to talk about it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you watched it, so maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I thought that the conquistador section was supposed to be a full invasion, military confrontation originally.
Yeah, it was going to be a little bit more Lord of the Rings, and I think he got the chance to do that with Noah. We'll talk about later.
Okay,
I think these movies are very tied,
I do too, and I was thinking similarly when I read a little bit about the budget cuts that obviously the stuff in the jungle seems really small now. And you could also have an entire sequence where they're on the boat, for Pete's sake, where the early stages of what's his face, who isn't fully in favor of the search for the tree. I could definitely see that, but that would also make it a 2.5-hour movie, which I don't think I could have gotten to the end if this movie was.
Well, imagine. So what I've always thought, and again, I've seen it enough times to wonder about this stuff, is if the conquistador invasion is the wraparound story, and the cancer plotline in the future are the buffers, the transitional points, and so it would be like shifting it to an hour and a half long South American conquistador epic with just an hour of this other stuff thrown in.
So the movie, as I understand it, the central part is the present tense.
Okay, whoa.
Yeah.
Hard stop, everyone. Hard stop.
Okay.
Hard stop. Okay. Is this a science fiction movie? Just yes or no. We'll go around.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Thomas?
I don't think it is, but maybe. I know that's a yes or a no, but I think we need to establish what the plot is, or at least which plot we want to talk about before we start talking about which one's which one's the central thing or not. Because I don't know. I think that there's a strong case to be made that the past and the future are both just stories in that book.
Yes.
But I also think that the fact that Hugh Jackman creates the Dr. Tommy, creates the Planet of the Apes, also as a suggestion, using the tree that's in the book, is also a suggestion that all these things are linked and real.
Yes. I think both things are true.
Well, you think both are true? Both that it's all in the book, but also it's all real.
Yes.
So those are two different readings of it. And if you look at because the way I saw it when I first saw the movie was like the present tense is the longer, deeper portion, more condensed of the story that's more conventional. And then as soon as she comes up with the book that has the entire conquistador story and then leaves it blank, I mean, my reading, very literal, is one is what she wrote and one is what he wrote.
That I think that's also quite possible. But we do see the future stuff the whole time before he started writing. And obviously, time is not linear in this film. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that the relationship that the flashbacks and flash forwards have to the main storyline is laid out in a linear fashion, in which case she has both the flashback and flash forward. She just doesn't have the ending to any of the three parts. And he, in writing the final chapter, might just be writing the conclusion to all three parts. But that's very difficult. I think your take is just as good as mine. I don't know that there's any evidence in the film to prove one way or the other.
Well, I'm a very literal-minded narrative person. So when things get metaphysical or allegory, I can tend to get lost. And part of what this movie does to me as a viewer makes me frustrated.
Can I ask, how much do you guys know about
trees?
About the Kabbalah and how how Reform Jews interpret the Bible? I'm not Jewish, but I've done some research into the Fountain and Noah from this Jewish background, and I have known mystical Jews in the past, so I have a basic understanding, I think, of some stuff. But I think that really plays into how this movie is intended to be read.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it'll be relevant to Noah, too. So if you give me a couple minutes, I'll try and be very concise.
Okay, but to answer your question, I'm like a 6 out of a 10.
On how much you understand about the movie?
No, about Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. But you go on.
So you please correct me if I misspeak, because obviously this is not my faith, and I'm sure I'm going to do some damage trying to explain it. So my understanding is that a lot of modern Reformed Jewish ideas and Kabbalah practice comes from the idea of the Midrash, which is sometime in the early Middle Ages, a Rebbe read the Torah and committed what we would think of as like a textual analysis of it to paper and taught it in his synagogue. And this was kind of the first time that anybody had applied outside thinking to the text and then used the circumstances of the world around them to interpret the Torah. And so that opened like a flexibility when looking at the Bible where and the biblical documents that the Jews and the Christians share, where the Jews can look at the story of Adam and Eve and read it both as true and as metaphor, and hold both ideas to kind of be true. And there's a spectrum on how much some Jews interpret it just purely as metaphor, and some Jews stick very close to like an originalist interpretation, but most are along this line. So in the Jewish tradition, a story like what is presented here, I believe, can be read, despite the cognitive dissonance, as both a text for interpreting and a text based on experience. So like both true and a story, if that makes sense. Whew, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, just a small correction. Midrash is just an interpretation of text, and it's been done since the fall of the temple, maybe even before then. Like it was done not just in the Middle Ages.
Okay.
So it's an old tradition because you don't have, you have the canon, you have the people of the book, right? And you have a set thing of like what each religion thinks is the holy text and what can be in or out of it. Mm-hmm. This is like kind of like probably in Protestant Bibles, there's probably a lot of footnotes or something, or other pieces of interpretation that are added to it to make it a little bit more sensical. And so just a midrash is kind of like what we're doing, even in a sense of like we're taking a lot of context and we're taking the text, which is what the film anybody can watch, and then we're bringing historical stuff and stuff that we know to be true or to be believed, and we're interpreting the movie through all of our collective knowledge to have a better sense and a richer sense of what that text is. And what we say isn't as valid as the movie itself. You don't want to take what we say as the movie itself, but it contributes to the understanding of the film, or in the sense, the Talmud or the Bible, what Christians would call the Old Testament.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. And that's why these movies are catnip to me, even if they are maybe no good. But
I don't think this movie is anywhere near as successful. Hearing you guys talk about it, what Aronofsky was going for is laudable in a lot of ways, because he's swinging hard for this to make it like something big and moving and spiritual. And I really appreciate that about him. But I think this movie's terrible.
I love
Philip K. Dick, right? As we've established at the beginning of the podcast. And I love talking about him more so whenever I'm drunk, blackout drunk. But I do enjoy an intersection of spirituality and science fiction.
Yeah.
And I've watched this film twice. One time I thought it was a science fiction film, and one time I thought it was a story being told to deal with grief.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which one's better, because neither of them really appeal to me all that much. Because I think what's missing for me is like I don't really feel anything for Hugh Jackman's loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I should.
Yeah. I agree kind of with everything both you guys are saying, despite the fact that I kind of like this movie. Unfortunately, the grief stuff is very pat and boring. The other two pieces of the film, I think, are totally amazing. And I totally see your genre confusion, Thomas, because I think you're pointing at something that is maybe says something larger about the way we deal with spirituality in our secular market of art, but sci-fi is really the only genre that has license to take spirituality seriously. And so that's kind of, hearing you talk about it, I think it is a film about grief. And if we had a different understanding, if we were allowed people to speculate about the afterlife and this sort of stuff in just our normal dramas, then this wouldn't necessarily be a sci-fi movie.
I'm not so sure about that, Ryan, because I feel like fantasy is often used more closely to religions. If we look at RRR and the religious symbolism there, but I mean, even closer to like Western home, if we look at The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and the Lord of the Rings trilogies, I mean, those things read the way they do because they're part of our Judeo-Christian understanding of the world. It's just kind of like inherent or underlying a lot of ideas of patriarchy and other normative things that are, it would be weird if aliens came or another culture watched it. It wouldn't read the same.
I 100% see what you're saying, and this may seem pedantic, but to me, those movies that you just described are movies about religion. Whereas, like, for me, and I'm a weird guy, so maybe this is, but 2001 and Blade Runner and films like this, I consider to be like about the meaning of existence and how we survive, and those to be spiritual concerns. Lord of the Rings does have a lot of both, I suppose, but yeah.
No, I think I 100% understand, and I think that when we get to Noah, that the difference might be a little larger for me. But I can see what you're saying there, Ryan, where it's there's a certain existential question that happens with science fiction, or can happen with science fiction, that doesn't happen in the fantasy. Because for me, it's just taken as read that there is some type of higher power and magic is real and there's a hand waving. You don't have to worry about it. And
that's a
good
great
triumphs over
point.
evil in fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think it's religion seen from two different perspectives, like a macro and a micro, or an existential and a theos, like theism or something.
Yeah, that's you're a smart guy. That all makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So Thomas, you're also smart you said something a few minutes ago about the film and the grief that really drives a lot of the narrative. And I think on paper, I can see because obviously it's a time-shattering grief that Wolverine has for Black Widow's mom dying. And I think on paper, you could see that that's his obsession, and it could take him to the very end of time, floating into the nebula as it explodes to kind of reignite her life or whatever the fuck is going on. But on screen, it just does not work. And part of it is their story is intermingled with two other stories, so we don't get to spend a lot of time with them. And frankly, Wolverine and Black Widow's mom, they don't have the chemistry that, if it existed, may have changed this movie entirely. It could be the exact same movie with two actors who, man, they are really good together.
Yeah.
And you can see why he would spend thousands of years trying to find a way to undo her death.
Yeah.
So two parts to that, I guess, from what you just said. One is, and I wanted to save this for the Noah part, but do you think a different format or a different director might have done this better? Because what you just said, Ken, reminded me of Alan Moore Swamp Things. And if this is an Alan Moore Swamp Thing issue or series, I think it could work.
Fascinating. To kind of both your points, one of the really clear realizations I had while watching this movie is, generally speaking, with Aronofsky, I do not like besides Pi, I do not like his single character deep study of what people are really like, in quotations, because I don't think he knows anything about that. And I don't buy it. And overall, that is my attitude, largely speaking, about Hollywood movies, is whenever Hollywood tries to tell a story about real people, and there are exceptions, and I miss some of them because of my prejudice, but I just never buy it. What do these people know about living? Like, they're all
okay.
But then when it's fantasy, when he's out in space, when he's in the jungle, this is, I think, for me, this is the mode of Aronofsky I love, and the mode of Hollywood I love. But
oh my God. What's wild is I have the exact opposite take as you, Ryan.
I
And I was going to
realize
save
that.
it for
Yeah.
Noah.
Yeah.
But here it is. When Aronofsky is able to create a world, he fails miserably. But
Wow.
whenever he is doing a specific individual set within a world that is, we can commonly call like reality, and focuses deeply on them, he excels. That was my take on Noah, and also this film. For why I was like, why is this not hit for me? Why am I so mad at the end of this film? It's not that I'm like upset. It's not that I'm shrugging. It's that I'm mad, and I'm mad because it seems like he has such great potential, and the film could be potentially an interesting creation. But I think that whenever he's able to play God and just create whatever he wants, he creates too many things and he fucks it up. There's just too many pieces.
When we started talking about doing this podcast, I started to suspect that this was the underlying, I don't know where you fall, Ken, but I started to suspect that this was the underlying disagreement about Aronofsky that we were going to run into. And I had just never considered that someone would prefer the kitchen table stuff. So it's fascinating for me talking about these movies with you, because we do totally come at this from exactly the opposite spot.
I think I may be some kind of middle ground, and the middle ground might be these two movies. Thomas, we may disagree about Noah quite a bit.
Oh,
but with this movie, I just feel like what Aronofsky wanted the viewer to be left with, I think it was more than his skill as a filmmaker and a storyteller at the time could really provide. And I think he really falls short on almost every single level of storytelling in this movie. Whereas, like I said, on paper, you can see why people think, oh man, this movie's going to have people leaving the theater in tears because they're going to rethink grief and death and their own spirituality. And afterwards, I mean, you're kind of left with a shrug and like, I'm not really interested enough to go look for maybe somebody else's opinion that may explain some things I didn't understand, which for Noah, that was my experience with Noah. I was like, I got to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
But with The Fountain, I had zero interest in doing any research for it or looking at what it meant. I know we talked about transcendental meditation. Aronofsky's a big fan of it. Obviously, Hugh Jackman looking like Kung Fu, meditating might tap into that. I don't know. Maybe you could tell me. But I just felt like I don't want to spend another 97 minutes of my life watching this movie or really thinking about it again, because it just fails on so many levels.
So I said two things that you had triggered for me. One's the Alan Moore thought. The second one is somehow for me, the Clint Mansell score doesn't do anything.
I love this fucking score so fucking much, man.
In the movie?
Just the score makes me cry. Yeah. That last, when Mogwai joins in at the end. Oh my God. That's like cinematic nirvana for me. As goofy as my man looks in the lotus pose, ascending, yeah, that's where it's at, baby.
I'm a fan of Mansell's score here as well. It's one of the few things about the movie. I also like Libatique's lighting design for tying all three timelines together and how dark the Mayan stuff is. It also has to be said, because we did mention Batman Begins, the fight scene in the Mayan temple is one of the worst directed fight scenes I think I have ever seen. And it wasn't necessarily done like with avid farts, which may have been cool at the time. It is just poorly choreographed, poorly shot, and poorly edited on every level. And I think getting to Noah is a different level of filmmaker for me anyway. Whereas in 2004, he could not have pulled any of that off.
Yeah, I think that's true, particularly at that budget. Part of the reason for my bias towards why I love the fantasy elements of this movie, to use Thomas's understanding, which I think is a better fit than the sci-fi thing, maybe. And maybe I was incepted, but the spiritual idea that Rachel Weisz articulates in this movie is actually just exactly what I believe. So it hits for me maybe more than it's maybe just a bingo that I'm the guy who thinks this about life after death. And so this is just right up my alley.
It should be.
I'm the white guy doing Tai Chi in space, you know?
It should work like gangbusters for you, and yet.
Oh, yeah. I was actually, my first thought after finishing the movie last night is that I think it would be kind of easy to do, but I would love to make a fan cut of this movie that just removes the present tense altogether, to see if you get that story and to see if it's more entertaining, because I think that you could remove that whole thing and a lot of it would be understood through intuition, and you'd have a better movie, at least a more entertaining one. Not any more coherent, but not any less.
That sounds like a music video. So what you're saying you take out her dying and her writing a book? Or what?
Yes. The parts of the movie that I think are executed more interestingly and also just have ideas that I haven't seen before are the conquistador stuff and the future stuff. And I would, since this movie doesn't really cohere anyways, I would rather just have a totally impressionistic, artistic nonsense movie that looked beautiful and talked about these ideas than sit through Rachel Weisz dying again, which is just, as you guys have both said, it's not just that the subject matter is tough, it's that it's handled so, just redundantly. It feels like an episode of ER, in the present tense stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the design and everything that happens. As ridiculous as it is, everything that happens in the Spanish Inquisition portion of the movie. I mean, I have a soft spot for Cliff Curtis, who's normally a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
He's great in this film, and I like the look of things. I like the head inquisitor's self-flagellation and the blood and all the people, like all the conclave or whatever the collection of monks are that are part of the Inquisition. It looks like a bigger film, but ultimately you could cut all that out and you wouldn't lose anything from the plot. None of that contributes.
The head inquisitor self-flagellation, and that's introduced, and you think it's going to become something, but it's basically establishing his character. He has one more scene, and then he's gone. Right? He doesn't appear again in the movie.
Yeah. Tomas in the past has a chance to kill him and doesn't because the Cliff Curtis character shows up and says not to.
Yeah.
And then you have an info dump, which you already know, where Mark Megalis is a friar or father, shows up and is like, hey, we got this knife. And from the knife, we know that if we look at it through lighting, we'll find the right star pattern or something so that we can then find the fountain of youth. And we know that because it's a knife and it has 3 holes in it.
Everybody's looking around. It's like, yeah, that sounds legit. Really scientific.
I'll cross the Atlantic for that. With an army of 3, kill one of them, bring the other one with me.
I know that there are movies on totally different levels in every conceivable way, but one of the things I kind of like about the corny conquistador stuff is this is like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
Uh-huh.
Like he's like, oh, you got to get the staff and go into the secret basement with all the snakes before you can. I love that it's like fetch quests and very fantasy, even though it's being shot like Kubrick,
Well, shit, you just said 2 magic words. So you have caused me to reference Darren Aronofsky's films In the Fragility of Hope by Jadrinka Shorin Kebab. And what they write, so they situate in their analysis Aronofsky between, and especially The Fountain is especially for this, the book ends with Noah, but that Aronofsky is a hybrid or somewhere in the Venn diagram between Spielbergian wonder and emotionality and Kubrickian concern for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they write as evidence of the Kubrickian fashion is that Aronofsky's films, well, this is the full 2 sentences. Aronofsky's films employ some similar cinematic elements. The overall style changes in each film to comply with the story to be told. This change invites comparisons with Kubrick, who crossed different genres, adapting his style to a story and yet resulting in a distinctively Kubrickian film. I know that none of us like Kubrick on this podcast, so we probably have nothing to say about that comparison.
I am more interested in how close she thinks, or they think, Aronofsky is to Spielberg's sense of wonder, because we've only got 2 films left, and I'm not seeing that in any of his movies.
So I feel like if Spielberg wanted to punish you, if Spielberg was a punisher, he could have made stuff like Pi and Requiem for a Dream, you know?
Okay.
I don't.
He doesn't want to punish you most of the time.
And we talk a lot about Aronofsky and the spiritual themes of his stories, and a lot of his religious background and upbringing, and his style as a director. But I mean, he's a writer on almost all of his films, and particularly for this one, I don't know at this point in his career how good he is writing a female character. Because Rachel Weisz kind of comes off as a manic tumor dream girl.
100%.
And then by the time you get to, I think, Black Swan and Mother, I think he's a lot more comfortable with female characters. But here, I think both the writing and the lack of chemistry is a real shackle to this movie being successful.
And that is so funny, since he was with Rachel Weisz, and Hugh Jackman is made, like a lot of his protagonists is made up to look like him. And his girlfriend and his stand-in for himself just don't have any chemistry. Maybe that says a lot about what happened to their relationship.
I don't know.
If you think about, compare I think the closest Spielberg movie to this movie would be AI. And I think the tones are actually not dissimilar, you know, and they both suffer from kind of the same problems, where when it really needs to get provocative and gnarly, the director kind of chickens out and goes with this more fantasy approach.
And that might be in part of commercial concerns, because this movie, like Noah, are both PG-13, and it does not seem like a rating Aronofsky was really built for.
Well, interestingly enough, this movie was rated R, and Aronofsky fought it with the MPAA. And unlike Requiem, he had success, and they dropped it down without any cuts to a PG-13.
Interesting.
The main concern was for the violence that was shown on screen.
Yeah. He does want, I mean, he is, and we would definitely get more into this with Noah, but he is weirdly an evangelist, and the Jewish religion is typically not an evangelical religion, but he and Handel are very much trying to spread at least their takes on Judaism.
I don't think so.
As far and wide as they can. You don't, I mean, we'll get to it when we get to Noah, but that in essence is what I believe is the reason Noah exists as a film.
Wow. Okay. Well, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, let's, fair warning, Ken.
Yes, sir.
If you ever give me a script or a manuscript and ask me to finish it, I'm going to take your protagonist into outer space and have them like love on a tree.
Well, that's funny you should say that, because I was watching this with Andy, and when that part came up, I said, when I die, I'm not giving any of my unfinished manuscripts for you to finish, because it would suck.
Her handwriting is terrible.
And it's not because she sucks, it's because, like, what a thing. And I don't know, when she is like, I finish it, it's time for you to read it. And it's like right in the middle of a phone call that he's getting from work, where he's doing the super scientific finding a cure for your brain tumor. And then she's kind of upset because he's paying attention to the phone and not her and her manuscript. Man, there was a part of me that was like, man, why are you spending an eternity trying to find a cure for this lady? She kind of sucks.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I was curious about. So I was watching this with my partner, and she asked, would you, if I pulled you into a tub and you're full clothes, would you be upset? And so then I had to like clarify things, like to have my phone in my pocket, and I had my notebook with all my notes. And so we got through all after about 45 minutes, we got to a place where we were both talking about the same thing. And I would say, yeah. I mean, if you had a brain tumor and you were dying, like, yeah, I would be scared though, because I wouldn't know if you were pulling me in out of like desperation or to be closer to me, or like if you, like the brain, like you can't feel your hands and your feet, or at least sensate like hot and cold in them. Are you having some type of an attack in your head where like you're violent now? Like I just don't know. And all that was left out of the film as far aside from like, oh my, I don't really feel hot anymore. I don't feel cold anymore. The idea of somebody changing their personality is a terrifying thing, and I guess is one of the things that's always kind of, I guess, left out of a lot of religious ideas of the soul. Is like, what does that mean if like you're Phineas Gage and you have a railroad spike go through your head and your personality completely changes? Which one were you, or are you? Well, you know, there's a lot of different answers to that, the different spiritualities. But is he going through all of time to recover his wife? Which wife?
Because the only wife we see is after, you know, we get her and him introduced after she already got the brain tumor, and they never really explained the chicken or the egg thing. Was he looking for a cure before she got it, or did he just like change careers the second she got a brain tumor?
Was he a cobbler before? And he's like,
right,
I love shoes, but
yeah,
and then she doesn't have shoes when she goes out in the snow. It's terrible.
What would have been great after that bathtub scene if it had cut to the lab, and he was like, guys, I came up with it. I think I have it. I wrote it down here on my notebook. And then he pulls his notebook out and all the ink has run because he was in the bathtub.
The whole science thing where he's like, wait, where do we pull up that, whatever it was, pull up that tincture of root that we got from that tree whenever we were down in South America. And it's like, what are you talking about? It'd probably be Central America, you know, Mexico.
It was Guatemala, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, Guatemala. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Central America. But yeah, and then the other part to that is they spend so much fucking time on him losing his wedding ring that I'm just exhausted.
It does pay off, but in a way that's never explained. So I don't know that So this was the first time I understood what I thought was going on at the end of the film, and I had been confused about what's going on in the future. But in the future, he has surrendered the idea that he is interested in his wife. That's why he feels guilty and is always seeing the flashbacks. Mostly he's interested in living forever. And so he's taking the tree to be reborn because he thinks that both he and the tree will be reborn together and he will continue to live forever as a human. And then he accidentally gets killed. And I always thought that he was going there on purpose to die.
Wait, so he's running away with a tree?
Yes.
From this tumor wife, or from the Queen of England, or Queen of Spain, or who? What?
I believe what is happening in the story is that after the events in the present tense, Rachel Weisz dies. He continues to research the tree. He starts taking the stuff that they're giving the monkey, and it allows him and the tree to survive the destruction of the earth. And because he and the tree, he's immortal as long as he eats the tree. He and the tree are traveling through space to what is essentially Big Bang 2.
Okay, so here's what I think is my difficulty with this film in Noah. That is a plausible reading of this film. Like I take a lot of issues with everything you just said. It sounds like complete fucking nonsense. Like how any of that would have happened. But and the reality of this film, I'm just kind of nodding my head, saying, "Yeah, you sound like it's a schizophrenic, but probably sure."
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's the problem with it, right? And you guys have both articulated it very well, is whatever cool or fascinating ideas he's trying to present to you, the movie's so boring and incoherent that you guys don't even care to dig into it. Your interest is not piqued.
Well, I also think that he brings the universe back, and we're in like an eternal recurrence situation where the end is the beginning,
like Mother and Noah, I think.
Yeah, and so I think the end is the beginning, and so he's not going there for immortality per se. He's also going there for his wife, so he can relive and be a conquistador again, and be a scientist again, and all the other things that we don't see throughout. I guess the other part to me that is always a little bothersome is that only those two people come back over and over again. I've never seen the movie Cloud Atlas. I've read the book and enjoy it a lot. but that is my understanding of the Wachowskis' version of the Cloud Atlas, is that they use the same characters over and over,
Yeah.
or same actors as different characters as a kind of a thematic conceit. And so it really is like a shame that you don't have an Ellen Borsten or Cliff Curtis or Mark Margolis in the future or in the past or at some other point, like and floating in a bubble next to him.
Yeah.
Like maybe launching him. Maybe it's a bunch of bubbles and they like help push him off, and then their bubble bursts and they're like, "You're our last hope." And like, so yeah, I guess I don't know if there was an appeal for the viewer in seeing the different timelines played by the same actor in the different roles or not. That also goes to that weird essentialism idea of like, oh, of course they look the same because they have the same soul.
Yeah.
It's a really weird thing to think. Like, were people shorter back then?
Isn't there? I think there's a foreign film out now that has 3 timelines: one in the present, one in the past, and one in the future. And it's essentially a romance between 2 people throughout time. Why is that such catnip for some writers? I have no interest in it.
Well, because you eliminate all the work of a relationship, right? It's all fate, and everything works out immediately and beautifully.
Okay, that was a great answer, Thomas. Thank you.
Provocative, Thomas. Great job.
Yeah. Thanks. Here's the last thing I have on my list of questions for you guys.
One more thing.
So I've been reading I'm reading a bunch of Aronofsky books that are kind of theory-based, heavy books. So from 2 different books, I have authors suggesting that this movie is very close to Pi, and that there's a conflict between ultimate scientific solutions to the mysteries of the world, and as a dichotomy to that, or as in conflict with that, there's a world of accident and chance, and I don't see it. I don't see how this comes very close to Pi.
Oh, it's the same. I mean, he's the same dude, right? Like the protagonist is so similar in what they're trying to accomplish. They want to know, both men want the power that God has and will do anything they can to gain it using the tools they have on hand, which are scientific and mathematical.
That's a hot take.
Yeah, I guess the hard part for me, that seems to track. I guess if spiritual technology allowed for bubbles in the transportation of the tree of life, then that would fulfill that, I guess.
This is something else I thought about when we were talking about the ending and what it might mean and stuff. I really, when I was younger, I watched Requiem for a Dream several times because the structure, the form of the filmmaking was so surprising, that I endured the psychic misery. But I also watched the background features, and he talked a lot, if I remember correctly, about realizing that people were watching his movies multiple times at home to figure out what was happening. Like, people would come up to him and say they've watched Pi a dozen times and then ask him questions. So I think when he started, The Fountain is around the time that he started designing his movies, much like Nolan does, to be repeat viewed. So, maybe he thinks, oh, they're not even going to figure out what the ending is until the 4th viewing. And like, great job, me,
Well, here's something I just realized, having talked to you guys for close to an hour and having seen this film twice, unfortunately. The conquistador stuff in the past, his motivation is, I guess, what I would call heart-based. Mm-hmm. And his motivation in the present as the doctor is mind-based, and his pursuit in the last bit, where he's Kung Fu The Legend Continues, is spirit-based.
I think that's very astute and certainly intended.
Yeah, it makes me rethink the movie I watch, but does not make me want to rewatch it.
Well, you have to do the heart and the spirit as well, Ken. You can't just think about it.
Okay. No thanks.
That's where the Tai Chi and appropriation of Mayan myths comes in, Ken. If you were more into appropriating Eastern forms of spirituality and South American mythology, you could get on this level. But sorry.
You know what? It feels a little bit like in the 90s, whenever you had to have like a strange character trait or tick for your main character. And it was usually it felt like a roll of a 20-sided dice for what they decided to give them. It felt like Aronofsky just kept rolling the dice with this film.
It does feel very overworked. And particularly, he just should have abandoned it when Pitt backed out. and done something else.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody know what Pitt went on to make?
Troy. I think.
Looking for that big battle.
Ah, yeah, Troy. That's a good one. Not really.
I've heard the director's cut is good, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. He plays Achilles. Guess how he gets it? It's in the name. Come on,
In the
we know,
ass.
we know how Brad Pitt's getting it.
In the ass.
In the ankle.
Does he get Achilles?
His Achilles? He gets sliced. His Achilles gets sliced
Oh.
on the battlefield, and then someone's like, you know what? That would be a great name for that thing down there, wouldn't it? And I'll look around the battlefield. You know what? He's right.
How's it going over there, chest? My only weakness is my chest. It protects my heart.
They just start asking people their names, like, that's his weakness.
Jugular?
It's the best part of the movie.
Oh man, especially if they just flashed it up like they do superhero movies where it's still with like the name that goes up. It's like splash, eyeball. Yeah.
Bad peripheral vision. It's his weakness. Just go out from the side.
Wasn't that Khan? Like Khan couldn't look up or something? Oh, he's from the 19th century or 20th century. We'll outmaneuver him because he can't think in 3 dimensions.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Right?
sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, we've gone a little afield, guys. But that was part 1 of our 2-part combination of the spiritual films of Aronofsky, The Fountain, and Noah.
Yeah. So join us for chapter 3, part 2, where we will discuss, which is sure to be a hot mess of an episode. We're going to talk about Noah. Yeah, which is going to be a good one. Where can people find us on social media, Thomas?
Well, they can find us in all the common things like Neuron, Bubble, Branch, Baboon, those interactive exquisite corpse sites, and then, real social media stuff like Facebook, X, other things.
So definitely stay tuned for the Noah episode. Thomas is actually going to start prepping for our next episode of Dickin' While Drunk to explain a later Philip K. Dick novel to me after we're done recording Noah.
So, yeah.
What's your favorite Philip K. Dick novel, Thomas?
Oh, boy. I mean, it's hard to beat Man in the High Castle just for the story behind it. I have to take a shot, don't I now?
Yep.
I'll be back.
Ubik. It's Ubik.
Okay, thanks again to Weird AI, who is also known as Ryan, for our theme song.
You're welcome.
It's fantastic. And thank you, listener.
You're welcome.
Oh, the static started right when you said that.
Oh
shit! I better stop recording. Okay, I will see you guys. Wink, wink. Next week.
Yes.
Finish it.
You know what that makes us together? Together, that makes us flash gorgeous.
Flash gorgeous.
I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you.
Flash gorgeous.
I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you.
It's 10-4.
10-4, buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you strayed from the formula.
You bastards! You don't know it, Bob. I'm an artist. And I must reflect that in my rhyme.
Darren Aronofsky, we're watching you.
Ken is right.
Did she turn into a goose?
Huh.
Please respect my privacy during this time.